All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. This call is about building participatory grant making tools on Hylo. And the goal of this call is to gather our community needs, insights, perspectives as we build out this feature. As we always do with any feature we build on Hylo, we want to know what the community wants, needs, and desires. So I'm sure everyone here is familiar with participatory grant making, but for those of you watching this recording, you can think of this as democratic budgeting or collective resource allocation, where communities themselves can decide how funds are distributed based on their lived experience, what matters to them, and their priorities. So there's many benefits for communities, but they get to decide where funding goes, where it matters. And there's transparent, inclusive process and collective ownership as a part of this, as well as resources flowing based on community needs, community wisdom, rather than top-down assumptions. So I'm going to just share a little bit of what brought us here today before we kick off. Originally, Open Team, the open technology ecosystem for agricultural management, was set to fund these features. They were convening agricultural tech collaborators but lacked the tools for the participatory resource allocation. So they wanted us to build those tools. Unfortunately, USDA funding was revoked, but then we started having conversations at DWeb and Pi Ranch, Tibet, namely, with Samuel Osland from the 11th Hour Project and the Schmidt Foundation, and it opened up space for collaboration with them to build these tools. So there's a couple other projects that have been involved. Tibet, I'll let you share on the Community Collaborative Tech Alliance, and also the Edge Prize, which we worked with a couple of years ago.
Yeah, just a little bit more background because I have been co-stewarding this collaborative tech alliance. And a couple years ago, we ran what we call the Collabathon as a way to fund, do a sort of a participatory funding process, like a hackathon, but where we would just agree as a community on what to fund. So we experimented with some different ways of doing that, and it ended up working. We ended up using kind of a messy process with spreadsheets, and but we ended up achieving consent on what to fund in the community as a group, and it was a really cool process that we learned a lot from. So I have that background, and Aaron, who apparently got stuck picking up his son and will be joining us shortly, also was involved in running a participatory funding process with Salmon Nation, called the Edge Prize, also maybe 2 years ago. And so, yeah, we're bringing experience from those experimental processes as well.
Yeah. So lots of history here and lots of excitement. It's been building for years now, and it's really aligned with features that we're building around stewardship and collective resource allocation. So we're really excited. And to Bet, I'm going to ask you to share some questions that we have for the community, that just to get the juices flowing.
Yeah. Um, so I mean, I shared the document. We will go over kind of the current high level requirements that we have already gathered from 11th Hour Project and Raft, which is a cool new fiscal sponsor that is working with 11th Hour and running processes like this as well. But before we get into that and kind of get feedback on that, we thought we would see, based on who's in the room, if there was other input on, have you in your communities and your organizations already tried to run kind of participatory or democratic funding or grant making processes? What worked well or did not? What were the barriers you ran into? And yeah, any input you might have on kind of what that ideally would look like and how uh, technology, or how Hylo could potentially support future processes like this really well. Um, so we thought we'd ask those questions before we got into what we've already learned, so we could get your unbiased thoughts if there's anyone here that has already tried to run these types of processes.
I have not, so I'll pass.
Aaron, have you all at Lift Economy tried to do this already, or is this something new that you're exploring?
I'm trying to think about if we've done it already. I don't think we have. And I guess the biggest comparison for me is more of like a trust-based philanthropy approach. No, I think I've just been a participant, but I can't even recall the specifics of things that I've participated in. I guess another example would be sort of like the money pile technology or tool coming out of the nonviolent communication global, I forget exactly the name, the global liberation movement, where it's kind of a way to participatory allocate of funding and resources, like in a real-time scenario where folks might be at an event and trying to cover the costs of an event.
Hmm.
And I guess
Totally.
the criteria for me when I think about ideal is low friction on the user end. So it's why Hylo would be optimal for Lyft Economy, because we've already tried to onboard our MBA community as best we can onto Hylo. And actually part of the strategy that we're thinking is that if we have some sort of participatory grant making project, we might be able to get more people on Hylo, right? Because if they're like, oh, a $5,000 award might be awarded to their project as a part of the MBA community, then it provides them a kind of an incentive to get on the platform. So, and then of course, like low admin on our end would also be ideal, so that there's some sort of integration where each MBA participant themselves can submit their project description on the platform, and then there's no back end where we have to then transfer it to a public facing way, but it's like a seamless thing where as soon as it gets submitted, then everyone else on the platform can see it and rank it and vote it.
Hmm. Cool. That makes sense. Okay, well, maybe let's just dive into what we are already thinking about and the questions that we have. So it might make the most sense to just, if you haven't read through this document, it's pretty short. There's the section current requirements. I think it makes the most sense for people to kind of just read through it for a couple minutes and let me know when you're done. I'll post our big main questions in the chat. Is that a question, Anita, or unfinished?
I had a suggestion.
Uh-huh.
I'm not seeing in the fields what you're asking for, the amount.
Um, cool. Let's maybe just let everyone finish reading and then we'll get to
Sorry.
questions.
Okay.
And yeah, stop at the in progress part. So we're only looking at the 6 parts under current requirements.
Okay, I'm done.
By the way, I can tell a story about something similar that happened at Lemicon this year.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, when everyone's finished.
Are you done, Kevin?
I'm done now.
Okay.
Maybe at the end, once we get down to voting, I can bring in that story.
Okay, great. Anita, how you doing?
Good.
Okay, great. Cool. So yeah, before we get to our big questions, were there other comments? Anita, you had a comment about the fields
Well,
in the
just
round.
if group stewards are creating and managing the round, I would like a field that said how much you're looking for.
So the assumption that we have here is that there is already a pot of money to be distributed.
Oh, there's already a pot of money. Okay.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
this is just about how does the community distribute that money
Gotcha.
in a
Okay.
participatory way.
Gotcha.
Any other?
There is though, Anita does have a good point that there might be projects that require a larger budget than the pool that's available to be distributed. So, but maybe Anita, there's a way to hack that by just putting that larger budget amount in the project description or something.
Yeah. Yeah, we were expecting that people would put all those details in the description, and the criteria as well. So the criteria would describe, what projects need to do to submit, including probably a budget would need to be included in that. Which maybe brings us immediately to our first question, which is, do we need to have some kind of structured way for submitting projects or proposals that includes a set of fields that would be, probably a default set, but then defined by, by the person creating the round or by the group stewards, that could include like, okay, we need a budget, we need a project description, we need, milestones, or, this is the set of things we're needing in your proposal. I think from our perspective, having a form like that is great and kind of ideal in the long run, but for the first version seems not necessary, because you could just describe what you need and then people can put it all into their description in their post, as well as upload any file attachments needed. But we wanted to get input on whether it seemed like maybe there's something we're missing, or that form would be really, really key for a certain use case. Any thoughts on that, Anita?
It's always Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Anita.
It's always helpful to me if I have real clear description of what I need to say, what I need to add. And if it's not there, then I may not know I need to. So forms are always a happy thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was going to say, if not forms, because I understand that may be a nice feature to have later, to get this released earlier, would be examples like templates
Yeah.
that people can use. Yeah.
Yeah, another easy option, easier than creating a whole form builder or integrating one, would be to just have a template. So you like click a button to create a project post probably, and it like fills in a template with like the headers, and then you can just type in your answers.
Especially that can be custom created by the group.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Aaron.
Hi,
Welcome.
everyone. Hi,
Aaron,
Anita. Hi, Aaron. Hi, Kevin.
hey,
Hi, Krisha.
Hi there.
Thank you for posting the notes.
you're here for the fun part, reflection.
Any other thoughts on that question before we get into the juicier stuff? Cool. Let's dig into voting methods, the most fun part. So we have these few options that we're considering, and I can explain each of them a little bit. Co-budgeting is probably the simplest in some way to understand and to build. And the idea with co-budgeting is that, let's say you have a pot of $10,000, maybe you divide it equally among the participants in the round. And so each person gets, depending on how many people there are, $100 or $500 that they get to allocate to the projects. And so it's kind of voting with your dollars in a way, although the dollars are not, owned by the person, they're owned by the collective. And it, gives you a lot of flexibility. You can say, I would give, $50 to this project and $10 to this project, or however much you're allocated. We've used this model before. We've used it at events like you were talking about, Aaron, like to help. Well, I guess it's a little bit different. We like had some extra money left over at an event, and we used co-budgeting to distribute that money to projects that were at the event, which was cool. So it's nice. It feels very participatory. I would say the main con is that you often end up with like a little bit of money distributed to a lot of projects, instead of like, maybe 3 projects get a lot of money and have a lot more, ability to then do their thing. And yeah, there's just I think it's better for that type of situation where you want a lot of projects to get smaller buckets of money. And consider all of these different methods can be gamed in different ways. There's certainly social pressure, and there's questions of like, yeah, do we display how much projects have raised so far during the process, which is one of our later questions, or only at the end? Because that can have a big influence. If people see, oh, a lot of people are backing this project, maybe I should pay more attention to it. So that's co-budgeting. And we could dig more into the pros and cons of each of these, but just to give like a high level, ranked choice voting is, there's different models for this, but just again, at a high level, it's like you say, okay, here's the 10 projects. I would put this one first, this one second, this one third. Maybe you pick your top 3 or top 5. And then there's different types of algorithms that integrate all that information and come up with the like consensus of the group. Quadratic voting is kind of a version of that, and is something that was desired initially by Raft and 11th Hour Project, although they since said maybe actually we'll start with co-budgeting. In quadratic voting, each person gets a certain number of points. Say you get 10 points, and then you can distribute those points among the projects. So you could just give 1 to 10 different projects if you like them all equally. But if you prefer one project more than others, then you can give it multiple points. But it requires, like, to give something 2 points, you have to use, I think, 4 of your points. There's like a quadratic algorithm that says, like, if you want to boost this project more than others, you have to give like a lot more of your energy. And again, there's studies that show why this is a better way to both allow people to kind of indicate their preferences and in a ranked way, but also eliminate tower dynamics in certain ways. And then finally, there's this platform Othello that we've actually previously even talked about integrating with. But I think it actually would be simpler for us to build something similar to what they have built, which is imagine you have a budget of $10,000 and there's 10 projects. Each person kind of on their own comes up with their allocation that they would give of the full 10,000, different than co-budgeting where you have only like a small percentage of that to allocate. So you would come up with your ideal funding package. I would give 5,000 to this one and 3,000 to this and 2,000 to that. And then in the background, it kind of does some magic to synthesize all that information and produce one or maybe a couple options that kind of maximize consensus, that ideally make the most people happy and the least people unhappy, and like nobody would block the final result. And so there's some complex algorithms in the back there, but I also think they've been they're somewhat well understood at this point, or we could build on the backs of other people. And the cool thing about that one is, yeah, it's really trying to maximize a sense of like buy-in and consensus, but it doesn't have that same issue with co-budgeting where you're like distributing a lot of stuff to, a little bit to a lot of projects. It's like you usually end up with a holistic funding package that kind of makes the most sense for the group. So that was a lot of information. Curious if there are immediate responses. And there's obviously other options, but these are the ones that have bubbled up as the most interesting from the people we've talked to so far and from ourselves. Thoughts, questions?
This is Erin. Which of the four is are there dramatic differences? I might imagine there's dramatic differences in the level of complexity to institute those four. From my perspective, any of those could be, a paradigm shift in the way funding currently happens. So I would err on the side of like what is like the lean prototype next phase that could be that could get us into more participatory budgeting pilots sooner, given the complexity of I am not a software developer.
Yeah, I think co-budgeting is the easiest. Yeah, there's not like a fancy algorithm in the background that we have to figure out. Although again, like I said, a lot of this has already been done by others, so we're not reinventing the wheel with how the algorithms work. Us AI is really helpful these days in terms of coding things up based on existing work. So I'm not too worried about what's the most complex. I think the Othello style consensus optimization would be the most complex and probably require the most time and energy to get right and experimentation. I actually think that this is basically ranked in terms of complexity, co-budgeting being easiest to implement, ranked choice voting next, then quadratic voting. Yeah. And we want to offer multiple of these. It's just with the funding that we have from 11th hour, we think we could only get to one in this first version. Anita?
So is Othello that much more complicated to do? I mean, it sounds like the most juicy one. So if it's
Yeah.
if it's not that much work more, maybe it's worthwhile. I can really hear you, Erin, when you're talking about getting it out the door and getting it so that people can use it right away. So yeah, just a question.
Yeah. I think it is because it will require a lot of testing with different examples to like make sure it's working well. It's a little bit more of a magic black box where we have to build something that then it works and people have to trust it. Um, whereas co-budgeting is very clear and obvious what's happening, right? There's no magic. It's just direct. What you do, what people say they want is what happens. And rank choice and quadratic voting have a little bit of magic going on in the background, but it's also well understood magic, and we could make it all transparent. So I think I'm sort of talking myself into the idea that the Othello style might be a little bit like a later, we start with something simpler.
It seems like Othello, which thank you for introducing me to that. I was looking for something like that. That would be good for large groups. Um, I agree. And this is the story I wanted to bring in. So Limicon had some extra money left over from ticket sales, and they said, let's do a pitch fest. So everyone came in, they had like 4 minutes each to pitch their project. And then we all voted, and we used the quadratic voting, and people were happy with that. And it was a lot of fun. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, this is a really good. I mean, it's almost exactly what happened here, except that we did it live. This is doing it where people have time to read through the projects. So it gives two things. One, it puts the project holder up front, so that you see them, their enthusiasm for the project and how they describe it. But it also puts them in the hot seat. They can make a mistake. The presentation may not go well. So I think this solves a lot of problems. It's asynchronous. People take their time. They can present it the best way. And yeah, I really like this.
Cool. Any other thoughts on the voting methods? Maybe we should put out a proposal and across our many Hylo groups with the different options. And
Good idea.
Mhm.
I think all these options.
Yeah.
Oh, Aaron, I cut you off. You can go ahead. I was actually just about to ask you which one would serve you the most. I'm very curious.
Um, I think, I guess I'm most familiar with ranked choice. So that would be my leaning. But I really love the idea of being able to, get input from the Hylo community. Because honestly, I do feel like this is I'm less versed in like technological applications. So I'm not the best person to weigh in.
Yeah. Well, with co-budgeting, the phenomena that Tibet was describing about a bunch of projects getting a small amount, I've experienced that phenomena a few times, and there's something about if an organization or a group has a strategy that can actually mess with the strategy in some way, if very few people have the resources they need to accomplish their goals fully. Because what that phenomenon means is like, okay, I need $1,000, but I ended up getting 300. How do I close the loop on that project or that effort if it actually does take the full $1,000? Whereas I feel like with ranked choice, there's a way in which like the priorities of the group get displayed, and it's in some ways disconnected from the dollar amount. And with ranked choice, we can say, oh, here's our priorities as a group. And the top 10 things happen to cost this much money. And of course, things may not make the cutoff in that scenario, and some things may receive $0. But in some ways, I wonder if that's better than receiving 1/10 of what I need, which I would then have to put into savings or an account until I can find the rest of the resources.
100%, Aaron. Yeah, that's a real limitation of co-budgeting. And from I have a board of advisors that helps me with allocating a philanthropic amount of money for my clients, and that's always on their mind is this enough to move the needle on the project? So yeah, ranked choice is really important for that.
Interesting. And yeah, before this meeting, I was kind of drawn more to co-budgeting because it's simple and it's democratic, but that flaw really does, yeah, it happens. And if the pool's not big enough, or yeah, if there's too many people in the pool relative to the amount of resources, it can actually hamstring certain projects. Yeah.
Not only hamstring projects, but make the whole amount of capital less meaningful.
True.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
I've
Yeah, go ahead.
I've submitted projects for grants, and they want to know, is the grant money going to be impactful? Is it a small part of the budget, or is it a big part of the budget?
Right.
This is making me wonder for ranked choice, how to, I mean, this is a detail that we will figure out later, but you know, if the top three things, their budgets are like greater than the budget of the pool of money that's being distributed, how do you work with that? Do you choose a different set of things that fits within the budget? Like you choose the fourth thing if it fits within, or or what if it's less than the total amount and there's extra to be allocated? And I think overall, I added another question in the bottom section under distribution of funds. It's like I'm imagining in most cases there'll be this community voting process, and then the actual funds will be distributed by someone, the whatever, the stewards of the group, the executive director, the board. Like there'll be some final process for the funds to be distributed, and I'm wondering, obviously Hylo can't control that process, but is there a way that we can encourage some kind of transparency and accountability, or at least like, because I'm imagining this community input via the voting process is going to come in, and then there will have to be a final decision. Like I'm saying, with ranked choice voting, it may not match exactly the budget, so there's going to have to potentially be some decision made by the powers that be about what actually to do. So I'm just like thinking about how to encourage a loop of like feedback and transparency and accountability there for the actual distribution.
Yeah, like right now we have, is this project completed? Another flag that if it goes through a round, did this project and it wins, or it's near the top, it gets was this funding completed?
Right. Yeah, like a follow-up.
Yeah.
It's also making me realize that I do think we need an easy way. Like we talked about having a chat room specific to the funding round, and that maybe that's a version 2 thing, but I'm realizing I do think we need to make it easy for the stewards to send a note or a message or an announcement to everybody who's participating in the round.
Yeah.
And so whether that's a chat room or a like click a button to send a direct message to everyone who's participating or some other way, that seems pretty important.
Yeah. Just the thread here is leading me to the option you were describing where Tibet, where you know, you present your best idea of how to distribute the funds. I present mine. Kevin, Anita, Krisha, everyone weighs in. And then an algorithm decides, oh, here's the, or suggests the optimal outcome. And that is becoming more appealing for the two sort of, I don't even know if they're failure conditions, but just limitations of ranked choice and collective. Okay, what's the other? But basically, with ranked choice, we have the limitation of the budget may not match the ranks. That's the limitation there. And with co-budgeting, we have the limitation of the budgeting not being an effective sense making or like a way to make effective decisions. And the sense that each person provides when they're thinking about the total or the whole is different than when I'm given a part. And yeah, I'm becoming attracted to that idea now. That like, oh, here's my idea of the best way to make these resources maximally effective. And that's different than here's $100, go have fun.
Yeah.
Just speak your heart, say the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is partly why DAOs and like Gitcoin have adopted quadratic funding, which is a different model where people vote with their own dollars, but then those dollars are matched by the pool of funds according to like the number of people who put money towards existing projects. It's a little bit like co-budgeting, except you do have to spend some of your own money. And the nice thing about it is, again, it's like clear what's happening, so then the money can just be directly distributed on the blockchain without any intermediary. But I still think it runs into the same issue of like a lot of money or a little bit of money being distributed to a lot of projects in ways that are much less impactful.
Yeah.
I mean, we could add quadratic funding as an option to think about for the future.
It's definitely more future oriented because that model also, like you're saying, in some ways, I feel like it has the worst of both. And it makes it into a game when really, or and maybe that it's I celebrate them. What they're doing is really amazing, but making it into a game is also not what most groups need. They're trying to coordinate as a group, and if they're using co-budgeting or collective budgeting tools, what can we know about that is that they're interested in pushing some of that energy out to the edges so that the decisions can happen more in a distributed way rather than from a leadership standpoint. And making it into a game where people are shilling their project or like having to promote it. There's definitely a place for that, but many groups would find that too much infrastructure and too much social stuff in order to just decide how to spend the money. Yeah. I think that many groups, my instinct is that more groups would need something simpler and that they don't want their group of 20 people or 50 people playing a game where it's like, vote for my thing, vote for my thing. No, you
Yeah.
vote for my thing. It
Yeah, I
makes
mean, it's always going to be some of that.
Yeah,
People do need to share about what they're doing and try and, yeah, that is part
of
of the
course. Yeah.
process. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but yes, I agree with you. Cool. We can keep talking about this, but I just wanted to bring in the last big question that we had, or other question, which was around displaying results of voting and whether that should happen in real time as people vote, or only at the end, or whether that should be an option. And if it is an option, which is, I mean, probably it should be an option. It's just a little bit more work. But then what should the default be? What is like, I would say what matches our values best and creates the best outcomes, uh, real-time results, or in process progress results, or only at the end. We need to.
So I've used Lumio before, and just for voting on proposals, but they had the ability so you to either see what people are voting or wait till the end. And we always opted for wait till the end because we didn't want to influence anybody's decision.
Mhm.
So that just seems like a fairer, cleaner way to operate in something like this.
Yeah, I feel drawn toward the unbiased voting method. Although I see your point, Tibet, that some people do want to see where's the energy, where are other people seeing that I'm not seeing. Maybe I should go look at that project again.
Yeah.
So it does feel like option is
Well, one of the effects of that limitation of co-budgeting, part of why I think or thought that arose in the with at least with the co-budgeting tool that we used a few years ago, was that you could see it. And so people would see that somebody's project was not getting
Mhm.
attention or resources. And so they'd put in a little bit there.
Yeah, I like that.
And I think that there is some merit to that, but it's also, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. When there is a constrained pool of resources and a limited number of people to give it to, somebody will end up not getting some, or much.
Mhm.
And I think that that's both good and hard. Um, hmm.
Another option that I'm trying to remember if co-budget offers this would be to have like almost like multiple rounds of voting, like a first round and a second round, where you see the current results midway, and then you do have the opportunity to adjust one time. That would be an interesting experiment.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm. Interesting.
Seems even harder to code.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Again,
This would be a later thing, but I think it's an interesting idea.
yeah, that's a good deal to capture.
Hmm. Yeah, this is bringing to mind the different people who will be utilizing this tool. One is like a group who's trying to make a decision about budgeting. Like we get this amount of revenue or we have this much in our bank account. We need to decide what to do with it. And then there's like grant making. And in some ways, those are two separate or distinct. There are distinctions between them about what their needs are and especially what their goals are. And my guess is those different audiences will want different things. For instance, in a like Terran Collective, I would want to see who think like what you all think is important in order to make some sense of the budget. And that
Yeah.
could start important conversations about, oh, why is that your number one priority? I can understand why you would think that's a big priority. Whereas a grant making person may have a complete inverted orientation towards not wanting to poison the well, not wanting to make it a social game, but really wanting to receive from the group what is their wisdom about who to fund.
Yeah.
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 And so
I think
that
that participatory budgeting, sorry.
I was just going to finish by saying, so the toggle that Anita was talking about actually is kind of seems important rather than picking one.
Yeah, I like the idea of offering both. I do think that participatory budgeting is a little bit different, and that the focus right now is more grant making and funding. And but these very same tools can and hopefully will be used for participatory budgeting in the future. And it just might require a few differences.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Are there any other final thoughts in our last 5 minutes here, or other questions that have come up?
I could imagine this functionality being used as also for our next economy living course. We're actually this Thursday, we're talking about financial resilience. And one of the steps that we encourage folks to take is to develop lending circles in their community as a way to like deepen our skill set about how to release control over financial assets and really kind of democratize. So I guess I just wanted to name, I'm really excited about this and excited to use it as a tool for really liberatory strategies for people to start having effective ways to like source community input on collective needs, collective ways of meeting our needs. And I could see myself personally using this.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. That is exciting. Yeah. I mean, where my mind is going right after what you were saying, Tibet, was how would we use this to budget for Hylo? Like what features are important? How would we get feedback from the community about which projects to do over the next 6 months?
Love
And
that.
I'm just riffing on that. And I think that may be a good thing to consider. Obviously, we don't have plans to use it that way right away, but it is part of how we can democratize building Hylo as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to be building this over the next 3 months or so. So there'll be definitely more opportunities for input. And hopefully we'll, talk to more folks and we should put some proposals out on Hylo to get input on what people might want or need. But yeah. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry I was late.
No, this is so awesome. I'm so glad y'all have some funding to do this, and I can't wait to see it happen. Thank you, 11th hour.
Yes.
Thank you, 11th hour.
The open team.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. Talk to you
All the
all
best, y'all.
soon.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.